Here we are back for part 2 of my Mission Impossible video series. Now, if you're not one of the lucky 7 people who have watched part 1, maybe go check that one out real quick for some context. I think it's a pretty solid video. You should like it. Don't worry, I'll wait. Okay, cool. You're back. Now, let's talk about the second half of the Mission Impossible series in 3, 2, 1, go. And we're going to start with Ghost Protocol here. Now, this movie is almost a soft reboot of the series in my mind, and they do something pretty smart here and kick off the movie by introducing us to the team members on a mission without Ethan first. Now, this allows us to get a picture of who they are right off the bat. As I said in my previous video, Ethan's teammates in the past have been relatively forgettable, probably because they were literally just people assigned to be on the mission, and were typically introduced pretty late in the story. In this movie, however, we're reintroduced to Simon Pegg's Benji and introduced to Paula Patton's Jane right off the bat. Then on top of that, their mission goes wrong, and this does two things. One, it humanizes the team as we see them grieve for the loss of their friend and teammate, and it establishes a secondary villain right off the bat as well. And it's at this point that the movie reintroduces us to Ethan. Now, Ghost Protocol chooses to elevate Ethan to somewhat of a mythic status here. His late introduction, along with the way he is introduced, sets us up. It's then built on by the team not really having a full understanding of why Ethan is in this prison to begin with, and what has happened to him since we last saw him in Mission Impossible 3. Benji thinks his wife Julia left him. Brent corrects him with another story of her being killed while he was supposed to be protecting her and Ethan, which caused Ethan to kill the attackers in some unsanctioned hit thing. Now, neither story ends up being true in the end, but that sort of plays into the whole mythic idea, doesn't it? Going back to Ethan's intro, though, this prison breakout scene is great. The back and forth between Ethan and Benji through the prison cameras is pretty funny. Ethan's actions in this sequence of rescuing his prison friend actually function as a setup for later in the film, too. It also establishes how high-tech and efficient the IMF runs when functioning at capacity, which serves as a point of contrast for the rest of the film. And here's what I mean by that. Starting from the point where Ethan is receiving his mission to infiltrate the Kremlin, basically none of their tech works for the rest of the movie, putting more pressure on the people themselves. The message doesn't self-destruct, the mask machine breaks, Ethan's climbing gloves start shorting out while he's on the outside of a building. All of this serves to add extra layers of tension to each scene. Speaking of tension and the Kremlin break-in scene is, well, it's very tense. Not a ton to say about it other than it's great, and Simon Pegg is pretty funny throughout. Moving on to the main centerpiece of the movie, the Dubai sequence. Now, this is top-notch tension building and storytelling on display here. The setup for this sequence is the villain's henchman is coming to buy nuclear codes from the girl who foiled the IMF mission at the beginning of the movie, who only takes payment in diamonds. Now, the plan here is to take control of the elevators in the Burj Khalifa to send the henchman to the wrong floor where he will meet with Jane, masked as the assassin, while Ethan, masked as the henchman, meets with the real assassin. They will then copy fake but authentic looking codes to give to the henchman and take the diamonds he has to the real assassin. Sounds complicated enough, right? Well, now everything goes wrong, thus escalating the tension. First, the mask machine breaks, meaning they have to risk meeting the hostile parties without knowing if the two of them have met before. Then they can't get control of the elevators without climbing up to the server room from the outside of the building. Then Ethan's gloves start breaking while he's climbing up the building. Then he messes up his jump. Then a sandstorm rolls in. Then the henchman shows up with a guy who can authenticate nuclear codes. And then everything goes to shit at once and the villain escapes with real codes. Now, this sequence is marvelous and perfectly crafted between the stunts, the tension in the room during the encounters with the antagonists, and constant escalations of stakes and problems build one of the most memorable sequences of the franchise. And from here, we travel to Mumbai to stop Hendrix, who is the villain, from launching a nuke at America. In this sequence, we get a nice visual callback to the first movie, the team working together effectively for the first time, and a fun action scene in a very high-tech parking garage to close out the film. Now, I really only have one negative about this movie, and that is the villain. He is outrageously forgettable. He wants to nuke the world because he's crazy. Great motivation there. He's barely in the movie at all. He also does almost nothing of note for the entire runtime of the film. And for several years after the release of this movie, I couldn't recall anything relating to the villain whatsoever. and he may actually be the weakest antagonist in the series. The secondary villain of this film from the beginning ends up being more memorable. Now that being said, everything else is excellent. This is the movie that, in my opinion, cemented Mission Impossible as a must-watch series for action movie fans. So now we come to Rogue Nation. And this movie carries forward a lot of elements that worked in the previous film. The team is largely the same, except Paula Patton had some scheduling conflicts and couldn't return, so we get the full return of Luther to the team, right? And now the carrying over of all these characters establishes to me that Mission Impossible has transitioned into more of an ensemble series. Now the benefit of carrying over all these characters seems pretty obvious, as you don't have to spend time introducing a whole new team who won't really matter past that one movie. So the team is formed, and now we can focus on other things. Once the opening sequence concludes with another very impressive stunt by Cruise, the whole plane thing riding it up 5,000 feet in the air, we get this scene in the record store. Now, I love this scene. Once again, it paints Ethan as sort of this mythic hero within the espionage world and shows us that through the eyes of the operative running the store here. Now, this character comes across as a relative newcomer to the IMF or something who has heard stories through her training or whatever about this amazing agent and is now getting to meet a hero of hers. The movie makes her very likable right away, and I know this seems like a weird thing to focus on so much, but it really sets the audience up to hate Solomon Lane, the villain of this movie, because of this. Yeah, fuck that guy. They learned big time from the mistake of the last movie regarding the antagonist and made this guy pretty creepy and memorable, actually. One other thing this movie got very right, and probably the best addition to the franchise in a while, is Rebecca Ferguson and her character of Ilsa. This character is just so much fun here because we don't know whether or not we can trust her for pretty much the entire runtime. One minute she's helping, the next she's betraying, or so it seems, at least. Then, once we know that she is actually allied to Ethan and co., it really doesn't seem like she's going to survive the third act. The movie seems to know that we're probably pretty sure Ethan will be fine, so they direct attention towards Ilsa's fate and keep putting her in dangerous situations alone. You also have an underdog element that carries over from the last movie, as the IMF gets shut down at the beginning by Alec Baldwin. So everything Ethan and his team do is while they're being hunted by their own government. Plus, they throw in some memorable action scenes, mainly the one where Ethan has to hold his breath for 3 minutes underwater to install Benji's profile in the security system, and an intense and sometimes even comedic car chase that turns into a motorcycle chase. And one other added element that benefits the movie is this. Ethan trusts Ilsa despite her apparent betrayals throughout the film, which causes some of the team, particularly Brandt, to start doubting Ethan's sanity towards the end, which leads to a pretty fun sequence in the later parts of the runtime. I honestly don't have much in the way of negatives to say about this movie. It's really pretty great. And finally, we come to Fallout. The first direct sequel in the Mission Impossible series. And I'm not going to say a ton about this one because I don't want to spoil it and it's still out, but you should definitely go see it. This feels like the final form of Mission Impossible, if you will, where the creators take everything that's worked about the previous 5 and use that and dispose of everything else. Unfortunately, Jeremy Renner was filming Avengers 4 at the time of filming, so couldn't make it back for this one, so we're missing a team member here, but that's about the only disappointing aspect for me. Benji, Luther, and Ilsa are all back, as is the previous film's antagonist, and Alec Baldwin's now secretary, Huntley. Henry Cavill joins the cast and is a perfect addition. Each action scene is riveting and fresh and distinct from each other. Not part of this movie itself, but kudos to the marketing team on that first main trailer. One of the best trailers I've seen in a long time. There's some great twists and reveals that keep you guessing throughout the runtime as well. Fallout really shows that Mission Impossible is a franchise that has learned a lot over its lifetime and evolved. It is a truly great film. So what should they do with this franchise now? Well, Tom Cruise is 56 years old currently and will probably be closer to 60 by the time they would start shooting another film. I would imagine his body won't feel like enduring any more of these types of stunts for much longer. Whether or not Cruise agrees with his body is up for debate. But anyway, that being said, I think they could feasibly end the series with Fallout if they chose to. But I'd rather they didn't. I think they should try to make one more movie and plan it to be a concluding story. Bring back Renner if you can, as he was the only carryover character missing from the last movie, and then tell a strong final chapter that ends with Ethan retiring from the field work or something like that. Regardless of what they do, though, I think at this point, the quality of the franchise has improved drastically over the years and is currently at a high for the entire action genre. And that's why I think that this is the best modern action franchise. But what do you guys think? What other action series would you put as contenders for that title? Where would you like to see this series go next? Whatever your thoughts, let me know down below in the comments. And that's going to be me signing off for a while. So I will see you guys next time. Have a good one.